Most babies are accidents, not me. I was engineered, born to save my sister's life. This comes from the famous movie My Sister's Keeper, in which a little girl is genetically engineered to be a perfect donor match for her older sister who is dying of cancer. Although Anna loved her sister, she knew she was born purely for the purpose of saving her life. The Fitzgerald family was then torn apart when Anna applied to be medically emancipated from her parents, meaning that she would no longer be forced to help Kate medically. The practice of test tube babies is becoming a reality with all of the medical advances made in the recent years. The idea that a terminal disease can be treated by this is also very appealing to people. But what price is all of this coming at? The practice of creating test tube babies should be abolished. First, save your siblings may suffer unpleasant consequences. Second, save your siblings may not always be a successful option. And third, a slippery moral slope will be created with the continuation of Save Your Siblings. Save Your Siblings may suffer physical and emotional consequences. An NPR website with the article titled Organ Donation Has Consequences Some Donors Aren't Prepared For, published July 2, 2012, gives the stories of two kidney donors who suffered long-lasting consequences after their surgeries. Jeff Moyer was left with daily pain, sometimes so excruciating that it left him doubled over. Vicky Young, left with one kidney after donation, then contracted stage 3 chronic kidney failure. As for the emotional side of things, parents often say that favoritism doesn't exist. But in families, especially with Savior siblings, this is evident because Savior siblings often feel as if their older sibling who they were born to save is the favorite, just because they were only born to save that sibling. The website metroparent.com has an article titled Long-Term Effects of Favoritism, published February 2011. This article discusses the effects of favoritism, saying that the unfavored child suffers the most. Depression, self-esteem issues, and the need to always feel special are consequences that last long after he or she has moved out of his or her parents' home. Sibling relationships also become strained because of the resentment that goes along with favoritism in younger years. Jeff Moyer from Above said it best when he said, quote, "We're sort of treated like living cadavers. Savior siblings may suffer physical and emotional consequences that last them the rest of their lives." Before a Savior sibling can be born, the embryo must be determined to be a perfect genetic match for the sibling that it is intended to save. The National Institute for Medical Research has an article titled Are Savior Siblings Humane and Proper Use of Reproductive Technology? This article gives a story of one family who had a little boy with a rare blood condition. As they went down the road to apply to have a Savior sibling, they discovered that his blood condition happened purely by chance and was not passed down genetically. This brought up the question of whether or not a Savior sibling was a humane and proper thing to do for his treatment plan. When a child depends on a Savior sibling and is denied one, then what is the treatment for that child? The article PGD for HLA Typing Suggested Clinical Guidelines on When, Where, and to Whom It Should Be Offered, published October 26, 2010, to a medical database, gives many of the requirements that families must go through to apply for a donor child. Number 1, a donor that is related to the patient must not be available. Number 2, the mother must be of a reproductive age. Number 3, the case cannot be urgent and needs at least 9 to 12 months for the Savior sibling to be able to help. And finally, number 4, this treatment has to be discussed within weeks of the initial diagnosis. So even after families go through all of these steps, it's still possible that they may not be granted a Savior sibling to save the life of their child. With all of the things made possible by IVF specialists, there is no telling just how far parents will go to create that perfect child. A slippery moral slope will be created with the continuation of Savior siblings. The Huffington Post article, Ethics of Designer Babies, published March 14, 2014, talks about how choosing the looks and abilities of a child can strain the parent-child relationship. The organizations like FDA, ASRM, and ACOG all have wildly different views on this topic, But those organizations, along with some of the people in today's society, can see that the society as a whole has not thought of the ethical implications that save your siblings can bring about. Buzzle.com has an article titled Pros and Cons of Designer Babies. This article brings up the question of who is playing God. This comes up when doctors and parents are able to select the traits that otherwise are naturally determined. This also creates a disconnect between the wealthy and the poor people in society. When the wealthy are able to afford the designer babies with the specified and desired traits, and the poor are not able to afford those luxuries. So, first IVF started out as a way for once barren couples to conceive a child. It then morphed into a way to possibly treat terminal conditions, and there is no telling where it will stop. So, just as the parents did in My Sister's Keeper, parents who have savior siblings do so with the best of intentions, hoping only to save the life of their older child who is terminally ill. Although these good intentions may start off with all the benefits, the negatives that come along with it are far too outweighing. I believe that this is cause for the practice of creating test tube babies to be abolished. I believe, though, that the medical research in this field should continue, but in turn be focused on ways to find alternative treatments for these children who otherwise would be saved by the savior siblings. The three main points that I brought up in the speech are just 3 reasons that this should be abolished. Savior siblings may suffer unpleasant consequences. Savior siblings may not always be a successful solution. And finally, a slippery moral slope will be created with the continuation of savior siblings.